Hi friends, this is Kim from Creative DIY Purpose. Welcome. I call it a recreated project because it's one that has been upcycled, and I put it up for sale and it was a no-go. So this was like a little cigar box, jewelry box, and I can kind of see why it didn't sell because it's very plain. So I'm going to try to add to it today, and you can let me know if it's a hit or miss the second time around. The first thing I did was go over the entire outside of the box with clear wax, and I wiped that back. I originally painted it with Solomon gravy and added a transfer by ReDESIGN. All right, so now that the clear wax is on, I will take some Best Dang wax from Dixie Belle, and this is the black wax. Go along heavily around the edges and then very lightly over the entire piece. We want to create some shadowing and some age. And because I applied the clear wax on first, I had a lot more control when wiping it back. So if you're like me and tend to get a little heavy-handed with the colored wax, try to always apply the clear wax first, because that'll help you to wipe back in any areas that you feel were too excessive. Next, I decided to paint the hinges and the front clasp black. And once I get those painted, I will be adding some copper gilding wax from Dixie Belle. But for right now, I'm going to let both the front clasps and the back hinges dry. And I have these cute little feet. You guys have seen it before in a lot of previous videos. They're also linked below in my description box, the exact ones that I ordered. And we're going to apply those on the bottom using E6000. And I apologize because before I misspoke. I did not put wax on the bottom of the box because I knew I was going to need to apply some glue. However, further along in the video, I do add both the clear wax and the dark wax. But first, let's get these little feet glued on so we can set that aside and let it dry. A few tips when using E6000. Once you set something in place, go back in a few minutes and check to make sure that they haven't moved, or because sometimes they can slide out of place. That, and wipe off that tube every time you use it, or put a piece of saran wrap or plastic in between the lid and the tube because it does get sticky. So I did set that aside for a few hours, let it dry. Now we're going in with that copper gilding wax on the back hinges that I painted black and on the front clasp. I did not do full coverage because I wanted to see some of that black pop out to give an antique look. I also apply the copper gilding wax on the feet. So hopefully I got them so they all match up. Now with the gilding wax, I do try to go on very light-handed because it's sometimes very stubborn to wipe back. Then going along the edges and the corners, I add just a little bit of the copper gilding wax, just for a pop of shimmer. Then I opened the box and went along the edges of both the top and the bottom, and I did a little bit more gilding wax on those two pieces than I did around the edges. All right, now time to line the inside of the box. I decided to use some vintage music sheets. That the sheet wasn't as wide as I needed, so I decided to take small portions of the music sheet and actually place them on the side, and then glue the regular size sheet up over that. So I'll use some decoupage gel from ReDESIGN. I love the stuff. And I applied glue all over the whole entire top. Took those two pieces of music that I cut and laid them one on each side, and then take the music sheet and lay that up over the top. So you can just see the ones that I cut and laid on the side, they kind of peek out. And that way there's full coverage on both the top and the bottom. After I get that into place, I apply a thin layer of the decoupage gel, wait for that to dry, and then I do go over the whole thing again. And now we'll do the same on the bottom. I set it aside for a few hours, let it dry, and now I want to find a kind of a similar transfer for the inside, so I decided to go with the B. I felt that didn't have to compete with any of the words or the music. So I'm placing it right in the center, and that transfer was super easy to apply. All right, I think I want to add some black wax to the inside. I'm going to get just a little bit on my brush. I'm even wiping some of it onto the paper first and then applying it along the edges and a little bit in the center. Now I do already have the decoupage gel on there, so it made it very easy to wipe back. And that is it. Let me know if you like this piece. Next, we'll upcycle this silver plated dish that I had in my booth for over a year. The products that I used were black wax, clear wax, white wax, silk paint in the color oyster, a touch of copper gilding wax, and Garden Marvels transfers from ReDESIGN. I recommend using a paint that has a primer or applying a primer prior to your paint, since it is a very slick surface. Silk paint does have a primer base, and if not, I would have used the Bounding Boss first. I allowed it to sit there for a couple hours and dry, applied the second coat. However, I make a very big mistake. The second coat of paint must not have been completely dry, and I went to put the transfer on, and all was going well, except right along the edge of the transfer on the left and the right side. So it still must have been a bit tacky. What I do when I pull that up, I let it sit there for a while. You know, I did burnish it with the plastic covering. I took it outside and sprayed it with 2 coats of Rust-Oleum sealer and matte, and then touched it up. You can see it over there on the right hand side. And then touched it up with some paint. So you'll see along the edge over there on the right hand side where there is part of the transfer missing. Okay, so now the next day I apply a coat of clear wax all over the entire front of the piece, wipe that back, and now a layer of white wax. Paying special attention around the inside of the trim to make it pop. Next, I'm going to work on that decorative trim, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do it without applying paint to it, but I ended up taking some of the black wax, a very light amount, going around the trim on the outside, and I did this in layers. I think right now I'm going on to my second layer. I believe I did about 3 or 4 layers, and watch that outside trim just come to life. Then took a cloth and wiped back any areas that were heavy or that I got on the other part of the platter. Then I went back in just certain areas where the trim meets to bring that out a little bit more with some dark wax. Next, I take a smaller brush, taking some black wax, and go right around that inside lip. And I do that, I believe, 2 or 3 times. And I love the shadowing that gave to this piece. Next, I wipe it back with a cloth. Then I add touches of the copper gilding wax along the trim. And what I do is dip my finger into the copper gilding wax and wipe it back on my paper. And that helps so that I don't apply too much all at one time. I do try to go in layers when applying the colored wax. So I'm almost done. I decided to take a little dark wax that was still on my brush and go along on the inside to create a little bit more shadowing, texture, and cover up that one spot that's missing the transfer. Then I wipe that back, and I think I got it. What do you guys think of this piece? I'm really loving the texture and the details. Moving on to a repurpose project. So these little wooden salad bowls, I've done quite a variety of projects with them. Usually repurpose them and glue them onto some type of a candlestick holder, make a little riser. Normally I try to leave them the wood color and put some type of sealer on it, but this one had a lot of discoloration. So I gave it 2 coats of the silk paint in the color Oyster and let them dry in between each coat. And we're going to apply some of the Garden Marble transfers. I'm so in love with this one. I have to pick up another one next week. I decided to go with the little brown birdhouse. I was going to use the white one, but thought we needed a little bit more contrast. Now, this one came off really easy and it came off whole because I made sure that the paint was dry first. All right, so after I burnish it, I do still have a little bit of that green moss. And I decided to go with that. That would give a little pop of color as opposed to using the brown Spanish moss. If you take the Spanish moss and twist it, I forgot to do it in the beginning, but if you twist it, it'll hold it together better so that you don't have all the little flaking pieces. All right, so after I get the amount that I'm happy with, I apply it using some hot glue. So I have these little birds that I printed out on cardstock, and sometimes I use them if I don't have any little fake birds to add. I found them all over on Canva, and I just typed in, you'll see an element section. I typed in birds. I picked a variety of different types of birds and a variety of sizes, printed them out, and used them on different projects. Next, I'm taking some black wax, going along the outside of the bowl. And once I got that where I liked it, I did decide to run the brush up along the inside of the bowl to create some shadowing and texture. Then doing the same along the outside of the bowl and underneath. This next step was an afterthought. I decided that I would make this a hanging decorative display. So I drilled 2 holes up at the top, and we're going to string it up with some jute twine. It would have been helpful had I thought of doing this, right from the get-go, but no harm done. I put the jute twine through one of the holes, and I make a big knot, tying it probably 3 or 4 times, and that way it won't pull through the hole. And I do the same on the other side to make our little hanger. And then I take a pair of scissors and trim off as close as I can to that knot. And I do make sure that each knot that I'm tying is tied very tight, especially at the end, because I definitely don't want them to pull through that hole. There we go. I decided it needs a couple more touches. So I had a little piece of greenery. I tucked that in and then tacked it down using some hot glue. One last step, I want to take my crafting toothbrush, dip it in some silk paint. This is the color Anchor. And I'm flecking on some paint to make some dots all over the inside of the bowl. And I'm wondering if you guys have any ideas on how we can decorate these and maybe make some for the upcoming holidays. All right, so next, I call this a thrift flip, where I try to take an item that did not sell in my booth the way that it was intended, and give it a little upgrade, either by adding a decorative touch that still makes it functional, or by staging it a little different. So here we have a vintage style cookie press. Has all of the pieces to it except for one nozzle is damaged, so I do throw that away. And I had this for sale for $9.99 in my booth for over a year, and even had a 25% off sale. I moved it and it didn't sell. So here we're adding a transfer from ReDESIGN. That way it's still functional. And I don't know if you guys have ever tried to take transfers off of something, but you could probably wash this, scrub this, and I think the worst case is the transfer eventually might start to wear off, which I believe just adds to the vintage look. That way somebody can purchase it and you either use it for its function or hang it as a decorative piece. I did not apply any sealer. That way somebody could safely use it for its intended purpose. Then I took some jute twine, cut it off, and we're going to string all pieces, and then we'll tie it right onto the cookie press for display. And I think around the holidays, if you have it on display, you could definitely add a nice, either a plaid bow or a velvet bow, whatever you like, even a burlap bow, and then maybe display it up against a wooden cutting board or in a basket. I have a lot of vintage cookie cutters. If you guys have any idea on different ways to display them or use those in repurpose projects. If you like the projects in today's video and you missed the bonus video that I posted last Thursday, I'll be sure to link that on to the end of this one so you can check it out. All right, so even though it was a busy week and a full schedule, the only furniture flip that I have to show you guys is this rocker. I am still on the fence about painting the seat. I'll let you guys know if it sells the way it is. Friends, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a super blessed week. I'll see you next Monday.